Eleanor Walsh had built an empire by 29, commanding boardrooms with ice-cold precision and never letting anyone close enough to hurt her. But when a quiet delivery man walked into her conference room that fateful morning, everything she thought she knew about power, trust, and love would crumble in ways she never saw coming. Marcus Reed wasn't supposed to matter. He was invisible, just another face in the crowd of people who served her world. Yet somehow, this man who drove a truck for a living would save her company from disaster, shatter every wall she'd built around her heart, and force her to choose between the safety of her gilded cage and a love that could either destroy her or set her free. What Eleanor didn't know was that Marcus carried secrets of his own, secrets that would make her question everything about their connection when her mother's devastating investigation revealed a truth that would leave them both broken. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because this story of forbidden love, betrayal, and second chances will take you on an emotional roller coaster you won't want to miss. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft whisper, carrying Eleanor Walsh up 37 floors to her corner office. At 29, she had built Meridian Solutions from the ground up, turning a small consulting firm into one of the city's most respected acquisition companies. Her reflection stared back from the polished steel doors. Sharp navy suit, auburn hair pulled into a perfect bun, green eyes that missed nothing. "Good morning, Ms. Walsh." Renee Brooks appeared at her side the moment the doors opened. Her assistant's warm smile was the first genuine thing Ellie would see all day, though she barely noticed anymore. "Coffee?" Renee asked, falling into step beside her. "2 sugars, and pull the Morrison files. I want to review everything before the 10 o'clock. Ellie's heels clicked against the marble floor as she swept past the reception area. Other employees nodded politely, but she was already lost in thought. The Morrison acquisition had consumed her for weeks. A mid-sized manufacturing company with solid profits and room for growth. On paper, it was perfect. Too perfect, maybe, but her investors were pushing hard for quick decisions. In her world, hesitation meant lost opportunities. Renee set the coffee on her desk and spread out thick manila folders. "Tom's been going over the numbers all weekend. He says everything looks clean. Tom worries too much." Ellie flipped through pages of financial statements, her eyes scanning columns of numbers with practiced speed. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts and move fast. The signing is scheduled for 11:30? Right after the final review meeting. Ellie glanced at her watch. "Are the documents ready for delivery? Should be here any minute. I requested the courier service you prefer." Outside her floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched endlessly in all directions. From up here, people looked like ants moving through carefully planned patterns. Ellie had always found comfort in that view. Order, control, predictability. She had learned early that emotions were dangerous things. Her mother, Linda Walsh, had taught her that success meant keeping feelings locked away where they couldn't interfere with good judgment. "Business is about logic, Eleanor," she would say. "Leave sentiment for people who can afford to fail." The lesson had served her well. While classmates worried about fitting in or finding love, Ellie focused on grades, internships, and building the network that would eventually fund her company. She had everything she wanted. Everything except. She pushed the thought away. There was no point in thinking about what she didn't have. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. "Come in." The conference room gradually filled with her team. Tom Alvarez, her operations manager, looked tired but determined. He had worked for her for 3 years, and she trusted his careful nature, even when it slowed things down. The legal team shuffled papers and whispered among themselves. Everyone seemed ready. "Let's make this quick," Ellie said, taking her seat at the head of the long table. "I know we've all been over this deal a dozen times, but I want to hear any final concerns before we sign." Tom cleared his throat. "The profit margins are solid, and their customer base is diverse. I don't see any red flags in the operational data." "Legal?" Ellie turned to the lawyer, a thin man who always looked worried about something. Standard acquisition structure. Nothing unusual in the contract terms. She felt the familiar rush of closing a deal. This was what she lived for, the moment when months of work came together in a signature. Good. Let's... Another knock, softer this time. Renee peered around the door. Sorry to interrupt. The courier is here with the final documents. Send him in. The man who entered was not what she expected. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a simple brown uniform that looked freshly pressed. His dark skin had an easy warmth to it, and his eyes held an alertness that surprised her. Most delivery people rushed in and out without making eye contact. Marcus Reed, he said simply, extending a clipboard. Signature required for the Morrison Industries package. His voice was deeper than she expected, with a quiet confidence that made her look twice. She signed quickly and handed back the clipboard, already turning her attention back to the meeting. But Marcus didn't leave immediately. He stood for a moment, his eyes moving over the documents spread across the table. Something in his expression shifted, a small frown that creased his forehead. Thank you, Ellie said, hoping he would take the hint. Marcus nodded but hesitated at the door. He looked back once, his eyes meeting hers briefly, before stepping into the hallway. The moment passed so quickly that Ellie almost forgot about it. Almost. Marcus Reed had been delivering packages for 3 years, and he had learned to make himself invisible. People looked through him, past him, around him, but rarely at him. It was easier that way, less complicated. But sometimes, invisibility had its advantages. People talked freely around him, as if he were just another piece of furniture. They discussed deals, problems, secrets, never thinking that the quiet man in the brown uniform might actually be listening. Today felt different, though. The urgency in the conference room had been thick as smoke. The woman, Ms. Walsh, according to the nameplate on the door, had an energy that filled the space around her. Beautiful in a sharp, untouchable way, with eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. He waited in the hallway as voices drifted through the partially open door. The meeting had resumed, and he could hear papers shuffling, chairs creaking, the soft murmur of important decisions being made. Marcus was about to leave when a phrase caught his attention. Subsidiary liability clause in Section 12. His feet stopped moving. Section 12. He had seen those words on the document he had just delivered, highlighted in yellow. Not unusual in itself, but the way the lawyer had said it, quickly, like something he wanted to gloss over, made Marcus pause. Through the crack in the door, he could see part of the table. The documents were spread out, and one page was angled toward him. His eyes found Section 12. His breath caught. The clause wasn't what it appeared to be. Hidden in legal language was a trap that would make Ms. Walsh's company responsible for any lawsuits against Morrison Industries, including ones that hadn't been filed yet. It was buried so deep in technical terms that most people would miss it entirely. But Marcus had seen this before. Not in his delivery job, but in his previous life, the one he tried not to think about. Before everything fell apart, he had been an accountant at a firm downtown. Before he spoke up about irregularities in a client's books and found himself unemployed with no references, he should walk away, mind his own business, keep his head down and do his job. But the woman in that room was about to make a terrible mistake, and unlike his old boss, she didn't seem like the type of person who would ignore a warning just because it came from someone she didn't expect. Marcus took a deep breath and knocked on the doorframe. "Excuse me," he said softly. The conversation stopped. Every face turned toward him. Ms. Walsh's expression shifted from mild annoyance to sharp attention. "I'm sorry to bother you," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "But I think there might be something you should know about this deal." The silence stretched for several seconds. Ms. Walsh's green eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "I beg your pardon?" she said finally. Marcus stepped into the room, his hands clasped behind his back. The document I just delivered. There's a clause in Section 12 that could put your company at serious risk. Excuse me? The lawyer half rose from his chair. Who do you think you— Wait. Ms. Walsh held up a hand, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. What kind of risk? Marcus moved closer to the table, pointing to the page he had noticed. This subsidiary liability clause. It's written to look standard, but if you read the fine print, you'd be assuming responsibility for any legal action against Morrison Industries, past, present, or future. That's ridiculous, the lawyer snapped. I've reviewed every line of this contract. But Ms. Walsh was already reaching for the document. Her eyes scanned the page, and Marcus watched her expression change. Color drained from her cheeks. Tom, she said quietly, look at this. The operations manager leaned over, reading carefully. His face went pale. Jesus, how did we miss this? Because it's designed to be missed, Marcus said. The language makes it sound like standard protections, but it's actually the opposite. Ms. Walsh looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw uncertainty in those sharp green eyes. How do you know about legal clauses? The question hung in the air. Marcus felt the weight of explaining himself, of revealing parts of his life he preferred to keep private. But the woman was listening, really listening, and that was more than most people had ever done. I used to work in accounting, he said simply. I've seen clauses like this before. Used to? Her tone wasn't accusatory, just curious. It's a long story. Marcus glanced around the room at the staring faces. The important thing is that this deal isn't what it appears to be. Ms. Walsh set down the document and stood slowly. She was smaller than she had seemed from across the room, but her presence still dominated the space. Thank you, she said finally, for pointing this out. Her voice was formal, controlled, but Marcus could see the storm building behind her eyes. He nodded and turned to leave, feeling the weight of a dozen stares on his back. Wait, she called after him. He stopped at the doorway and looked back. What's your name again? Marcus Reed. She nodded once, committing it to memory. Marcus Reed. Thank you. As he walked toward the elevator, Marcus could hear raised voices from the conference room. The deal was falling apart, and a lot of important people were about to have a very bad day. But he had done the right thing. For once in his life, he had spoken up, and someone had actually listened. The elevator doors closed, carrying him back down to the world where he belonged. Back to his truck, his route, his invisible life. But something had changed in those few minutes. Something he couldn't quite name. As he drove away from the gleaming tower, Marcus caught himself thinking about green eyes and the way they had looked at him. Not through him, but at him. Like he was someone worth seeing. It was a dangerous thought. One that could lead to hope. And hope was something he had learned not to trust. But for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Reed felt like he mattered. And 37 floors above the busy street, Eleanor Walsh was staring out her window, watching his delivery truck disappear into traffic, wondering how a man she had never noticed before had just saved her from the biggest mistake of her career. The deal was off. The signing was canceled. Her investors would be furious, and her reputation would take a hit. But she was still standing. Still in control, thanks to a delivery man who saw what everyone else had missed. The conference room felt like a tomb after Marcus left. Ellie stared at the contract pages scattered across the polished table, her mind racing through the implications of what had just happened. The Morrison deal, 6 months of work, millions in potential revenue, was dead in the water. How the hell did we miss this? Tom's voice cut through the silence, his usual calm cracked wide open. The lawyer was frantically flipping through pages, his face growing redder by the minute. This is deliberately misleading. The way they buried this clause, it's almost like they wanted us to overlook it. Ellie picked up the document and read the section again. The words swam before her eyes, but the meaning was crystal clear. If they had signed this contract, Meridian Solutions would have been liable for any lawsuit filed against Morrison Industries, including 3 major environmental cases that weren't mentioned anywhere in their disclosure documents. She would have lost everything. "Cancel the signing," she said quietly. "Ms. Walsh," the lawyer began. "Cancel it, now." Her voice carried the authority that had built her company, but inside, she felt shaken in a way she hadn't experienced since she was 12 years old, and her father left without saying goodbye. The room emptied quickly, leaving only Ellie and Renee. Her assistant closed the door and approached carefully, like someone trying not to spook a wounded animal. "Are you okay?" Renee asked softly. Ellie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A delivery man just saved my company. A delivery man saw what my lawyer, my operations manager, and I all missed." She turned to face the window, watching the city move below. How is that possible? Maybe because he wasn't looking for what he expected to see. The observation hit deeper than Renee probably intended. Ellie had built her success on quick decisions and confident leadership. She trusted her instincts, relied on her team, and moved fast while competitors hesitated. But somewhere along the way, that confidence had turned into something else. Something that made her stop really looking at things. "Did we thank him?" Ellie asked suddenly. Renee hesitated. "Well, you said thank you. But did we really thank him? He just prevented me from making a catastrophic mistake, and I treated him like he was just doing his job." "He was just doing his job, wasn't he?" Ellie turned from the window. "Was he? Is it a delivery driver's job to review legal contracts and spot buried clauses that could destroy companies?" The question hung between them. Outside, phones were ringing as news of the canceled signing spread through the building. Ellie would have to make calls, explain decisions, manage the fallout. But first, she needed to understand what had just happened. "Find out who he is," she said. "Ms. Walsh?" "Marcus Reed. Find out what company he works for, what route he drives, whatever you can learn. I want to talk to him again." Renee made a note. "May I ask why?" Ellie wasn't entirely sure herself. Logic said to send a thank you card and move on. But something about the quiet confidence in Marcus's voice, the way he had stepped into a room full of lawyers and executives without flinching, made her want to understand how he saw things so clearly. "Because I have a feeling there's more to him than we know." Marcus finished his route at 4:30, his mind still replaying the morning's events. He had broken his own cardinal rule: mind your own business and stay invisible. But watching that woman, Eleanor Walsh, he had learned from the nameplate on her desk, about to walk into a trap, had stirred something in him that he couldn't ignore. His uncle Calvin was waiting on the front porch when Marcus pulled into the driveway of the small house they shared. At 65, Calvin Reed had the kind of calm strength that came from working with his hands for 40 years and raising a nephew who had shown up on his doorstep as a scared 15-year-old. "You're home early," Calvin observed, setting down his newspaper. Marcus climbed the porch steps and settled into the old wicker chair beside his uncle. "Finish the route." "You look troubled." There was no point in trying to hide anything from Calvin. The man had raised him, taught him right from wrong, and knew all his tells. "I spoke up today," Marcus said finally. Calvin raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "Saw a woman about to make a business mistake. A big one. I should have kept walking, but..." Marcus trailed off, staring at the quiet street where children rode bikes and neighbors worked in their gardens. "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Calvin was quiet for a long moment, the way he got when he was choosing his words carefully. "You remember what I told you when you first came to live with me?" Marcus smiled despite his mood. "Which time? You told me a lot of things. About doing what's right, even when it's hard." "I remember." Your mama raised you to speak truth, even when people didn't want to hear it. That got her in trouble sometimes, but it also meant she could sleep at night. Calvin leaned back in his chair. What happened the last time you spoke up? The question hit its mark. Marcus had never told his uncle the full story about why he left his accounting job, just that there had been a disagreement with management. But Calvin wasn't stupid. He knew his nephew well enough to read between the lines. I lost my job, my career, my future, basically. And today? Marcus thought about the conference room, the way Eleanor Walsh had listened instead of dismissing him, the gratitude in her voice when she said his name. Today was different. Different how? She listened, actually listened, and she thanked me for it. Calvin nodded slowly. Sounds like you met someone worth knowing. Uncle Cal, she's the CEO of a major company. I drive a delivery truck. We don't exactly move in the same circles. Circles, Calvin scoffed. Boy, you think too much about circles. Good people are good people, no matter where you find them. Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Hello? Is this Marcus Reed? The voice was professional, female, but not familiar. Yes, this is Marcus. This is Renee Brooks, assistant to Eleanor Walsh at Meridian Solutions. Ms. Walsh would like to speak with you, if you have a moment. Marcus felt his heart rate pick up. Is there a problem with the delivery? No problem at all. Actually, she wanted to thank you properly for what you did this morning. Would you be available to come back to the office tomorrow? Marcus looked at his uncle, who was watching with interested eyes. What time? Would 4 o'clock work? After your regular route? I suppose that would be fine. Wonderful. I'll let Ms. Walsh know. Thank you, Mr. Reed. The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at his phone. Well? Calvin prompted. She wants to see me again. Tomorrow. Calvin smiled, the kind of smile that said he knew something his nephew didn't. Like I said, sounds like someone worth knowing. Eleanor Walsh had never felt nervous about a 4 o'clock meeting in her life, but as she watched the clock tick past 3:55, she found herself checking her appearance in her computer screen's reflection for the third time. She had spent the afternoon trying to understand why this mattered so much to her. A simple thank you should have been enough. Send flowers. Write a note. Maybe arrange for a small bonus from his delivery company. Standard corporate gratitude. But every time she tried to move on, she found herself thinking about the way Marcus had looked at that contract. Not scanning it quickly like everyone else in the room, but really reading it, understanding it, seeing through the deliberately confusing language to the trap underneath. When was the last time someone had seen through her defenses so clearly? The thought came unbidden and unwelcome. This wasn't about her defenses. This was about business. About understanding how someone outside her industry had spotted something her experts had missed. Wasn't it? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Renee peered around the door. Mr. Reed is here. Send him in. Eleanor stood as Marcus entered her office, and she was struck again by his quiet confidence. He had changed out of his delivery uniform into dark jeans and a button-down shirt that brought out the warmth in his brown eyes. He looked around the office, taking in the awards on the walls, the city view, the expensive furniture, but his expression remained neutral. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing to the chairs arranged near the window. Thank you for asking me. Marcus settled into a chair, his hands resting calmly in his lap. Now that he was here, Eleanor found herself unsure how to begin. In business meetings, she always had an agenda, a clear objective, a strategy for getting what she wanted. But what did she want from this conversation? I wanted to properly thank you for what you did this morning, she began. You saved my company from a very expensive mistake. You already thanked me. Did I? Or did I just say the words? Marcus studied her for a moment. What's the difference? The question was simple, but something in his tone suggested it wasn't casual curiosity. He was testing her, seeing if she really meant what she was saying. The difference is that when I thanked you this morning, I was still thinking of you as just a delivery driver who happened to notice something. Now I'm wondering how you saw what an entire room of professionals missed. Maybe I had a different perspective. Maybe. Or maybe you know more about business than most delivery drivers do. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Eleanor sensed she was approaching something important. Something he didn't share easily. I used to work in finance, he said finally. Corporate accounting, actually. I've seen a lot of contracts over the years. Used to? It's a long story. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. I have time. Marcus looked out the window at the city spreading below them. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. I worked for a firm downtown for 5 years. Good job, decent pay, room for advancement. Everything I thought I wanted. He paused, and Eleanor waited. I found some irregularities in a client's books. Numbers that didn't add up. Expenses that couldn't be justified. My boss told me to let it go, that it wasn't our problem. But you couldn't let it go. No, I couldn't. Marcus turned back to her. I kept digging, found evidence of embezzlement, tax evasion, fraud, enough to put people in prison. Eleanor felt a chill. What happened? I reported it, to my boss, to the partners, to the authorities. Marcus's smile was bitter. The client was one of the firm's biggest accounts. They weren't interested in doing the right thing if it cost them money. They fired you. Officially, it was downsizing, budget cuts, nothing personal. Marcus shrugged. But word gets around in a small industry. Who wants to hire someone who causes problems? Eleanor stared at him, pieces falling into place. So you became a delivery driver. It pays the bills, keeps me out of trouble, most days. The silence stretched between them. Eleanor found herself reevaluating everything she thought she knew about this man. He hadn't just spotted a problematic clause by accident. He had recognized a deliberate deception because he had seen it before, had fought it before, and had paid a heavy price for choosing integrity over convenience. I'm sorry, she said softly. For what? For what happened to you? For the fact that doing the right thing cost you your career. Marcus looked surprised by her sympathy. It was my choice. That doesn't make it fair. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Eleanor realized this was the first real conversation she had had in months, maybe years. Not a business negotiation or social obligation, but two people actually talking to each other. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. When you saw that contract this morning, why did you speak up? After what happened before, why risk it again? Marcus considered the question seriously. Because you were about to get hurt, and I knew I could prevent it. The simplicity of his answer hit her like a physical force. No calculation, no consideration of potential consequences. He had acted purely because it was the right thing to do. Even though I was a stranger. Especially because you were a stranger. You had no reason to listen to me, but you did anyway. That told me something about who you are. Eleanor felt something shift inside her chest, like ice beginning to crack. What did it tell you? Marcus smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. That maybe not everyone in a position of power is afraid of the truth. The words hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than seemed possible. Eleanor realized she was holding her breath. Would you like to get coffee sometime? The question was out before she could stop herself. Marcus's expression grew cautious. Coffee? I mean, I'd like to understand how you see things. Your perspective. It's refreshing. Ms. Walsh? Eleanor, or Ellie, actually. Most people call me Ellie. Ellie. He said her name like he was testing how it felt. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Why not? Marcus gestured around the elegant office. Because we live in different worlds. You're a CEO, I'm a delivery driver. People might talk. Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks. He was right, of course. Her mother would have a fit if she knew Eleanor was even considering socializing with someone from his background. Her business associates would whisper. Her carefully controlled image would be called into question. But for the first time in years, she found herself not caring what other people thought. Let them talk, she said firmly. I'm asking you for coffee, not proposing marriage. The joke fell flat, and Eleanor immediately regretted it. But Marcus's smile told her he understood she was nervous too. Coffee, he repeated. Just coffee. Just coffee. Marcus stood slowly. There's a place called Maya's about 6 blocks from here. Nothing fancy, but they make good coffee. Tomorrow? Around 6? I'll be there. After he left, Eleanor sat in her office as shadows lengthened across the floor. Tomorrow, she would have coffee with a man who drove a delivery truck and had seen right through her biggest business mistake. A man who had lost his career for telling the truth and still chose to speak up when it mattered. She should be focusing on damage control, on finding a new acquisition target, on managing her investors' disappointment. Instead, she found herself looking forward to 6 o'clock tomorrow. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Eleanor Walsh was curious about someone other than herself. And that scared her more than any failed business deal ever could. Maya's cafe turned out to be exactly what Marcus had promised. Nothing fancy, just worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, and the smell of fresh ground coffee beans mixing with the sound of quiet conversations. Ellie arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a corner table where she could see the door. She had changed clothes 3 times before leaving her apartment, finally settling on dark jeans and a simple sweater. The outfit felt strange after a day of tailored suits and board meetings, but somehow right for this place, this moment. Marcus appeared in the doorway at exactly 6 o'clock, scanning the room until his eyes found hers. He wore the same button-down shirt from yesterday, and when he smiled and headed toward her table, Ellie felt that same unexpected flutter in her chest. You found it okay? He asked, settling into the chair across from her. GPS is a wonderful thing. She gestured around the cafe. This is nice. Feels real. Real? I spend most of my time in places designed to impress people. Conference rooms with marble tables, restaurants where the menu doesn't have prices, office buildings that look like monuments to success. She picked up her coffee cup, warming her hands around it. This feels like a place where people actually live their lives. Marcus smiled. Uncle Cal would like that description. He's always saying that fancy doesn't make something better, just more expensive. Tell me about your uncle. He raised me from the time I was 15. My mom died when I was 14, cancer, and I went a little wild for a while. Cal took me in, straightened me out, taught me how to be a man. Marcus's voice carried deep affection. He worked construction his whole life, never made much money, but he's the wisest person I know. What would he think about you having coffee with me? He'd probably say something like, good people are good people, no matter where you find them. Marcus paused. What would your family think? The question hit closer to home than Ellie expected. My mother would have opinions, strong ones. About me specifically, or about you socializing with delivery drivers in general. His directness surprised her, but she found herself appreciating it. Both, probably. My mother believes very strongly in appropriate associations, meaning people who can help your career. Something like that. Ellie took a sip of coffee, using the moment to decide how honest to be. My mother sees every relationship as a transaction. Who can you help? Who can help you? What's the benefit to maintaining the connection? That sounds lonely. The observation was so gentle, so accurate that it took Ellie's breath away. It is lonely, I just didn't realize how lonely until yesterday, when someone did something kind without expecting anything in return." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the evening light filtering through the cafe windows, casting everything in warm, amber tones. Around them, other conversations continued. An elderly couple discussing their grandchildren, two women laughing over shared stories, a man reading quietly in the corner. "Can I ask you something?" Ellie said finally. "Sure." "Do you ever regret it? Speaking up at your old job, I mean. Knowing what it cost you?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I regret how it happened. I wish I'd been smarter about it, found a better way to handle the situation. But the choice itself? No. I can't regret doing what I knew was right." "Even though it changed everything for you?" "Even though it changed everything." He leaned forward slightly. "What about you?"
"Do you ever regret building the kind of life where you can't trust people to tell you the truth?" The question stopped her cold. "I don't." "What do you mean?" "Yesterday, in that conference room, I saw a bunch of people who were afraid to challenge you. Your lawyer, your operations manager, even your assistant. They all deferred to your judgment instead of really examining that contract. They trust my leadership. Or they're afraid of disappointing you." Ellie felt defensive walls rising automatically. I encourage input from my team." Marcus's expression remained gentle, but his eyes were steady. "When was the last time someone disagreed with you in a meeting?" The question hung in the air while Ellie searched her memory. Had Tom ever actually opposed one of her decisions? Had her lawyer ever pushed back on a deal she wanted to make? "I make good decisions," she said finally. "I'm not questioning your judgment. I'm just wondering if you've created an environment where people feel safe telling you when you're wrong." The honesty was brutal and kind at the same time. Ellie realized she was holding her breath, waiting for him to soften the observation, to apologize for being too direct. But Marcus simply waited for her to process what he'd said. "You think I intimidate people," she said finally. "I think you're very successful, very confident, and very used to being right. Those are good qualities, but they can make it hard for people to speak up when they see problems." "But you spoke up." Marcus smiled. "I had nothing to lose. I was already outside your world looking in. That made it easier to see things clearly. And now? Now what? Are you still outside, looking in?" The question carried more weight than she had intended. Marcus seemed to understand that she was asking about more than just business dynamics. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Are you asking me to come inside?" Ellie felt her heart racing. This conversation had moved far beyond coffee between acquaintances. They were talking around something bigger, something that scared and excited her in equal measure. "I don't know either," she admitted. "I just know that talking to you feels different than talking to anyone else in my life." "Different how? Like you're not trying to impress me or get something from me. Like you just want to understand who I actually am." Marcus reached across the table and touched her hand briefly. The contact was warm, gentle, and over almost before it began. "That's exactly what I want." The simple honesty of his words hit her like a physical force. When was the last time someone had wanted to know her, rather than use her or impress her or gain something from their association with her? "I should probably go," she said, though she made no move to leave. "Probably. This is complicated." "Yes, it is. People will talk if this becomes something." "What kind of something?" Ellie looked into his eyes and saw patience, warmth, and something that might have been hope. "I don't know yet." "That's okay. We don't have to figure it all out over one cup of coffee." She laughed, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. "When did you become so wise about relationships?" I'm not wise about anything. I just know that good things are worth being careful with. They walked out of the cafe together as the sun was setting, painting the city streets in golden light. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of approaching autumn and the distant sound of traffic. "Can I walk you to your car?" Marcus asked. "It's just around the corner." "Still." They walked slowly, neither seeming eager to end the evening. When they reached her silver BMW, Ellie turned to face him. "Thank you for tonight. For the conversation. Thank you for asking me." She hesitated, keys in her hand. "Marcus? Yeah? Would you like to have dinner sometime? Somewhere nicer than Maya's?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Ellie felt uncertainty creeping in. Maybe she had misread the evening, misunderstood what was happening between them. "Ellie," he said finally, "I need you to understand something. I'm not looking for charity or pity. I'm not some project for you to fix. That's not what this is. Then what is it?" She searched for the right words. "It's me wanting to spend more time with someone who makes me think differently about everything." Marcus studied her face in the streetlight. "Everything?" "Everything." He smiled then, the expression transforming his entire face. "In that case, yes. I'd like to have dinner with you." "Saturday night?" "Saturday night." As she drove home through the quiet streets, Ellie found herself smiling for no particular reason. Her phone buzzed with messages from her assistant, her lawyer, her mother, but she ignored them all. For the first time in years, Eleanor Walsh was thinking about something other than work. She was thinking about warm brown eyes and gentle honesty, and the way it felt to be seen clearly by someone who had no reason to pretend with her. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely outside her experience. And she couldn't wait for Saturday night. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that made the city look tired and worn. Ellie changed her outfit 4 times before settling on a simple black dress that was elegant without being showy. She had chosen a small Italian restaurant downtown, intimate but not romantic, upscale but not intimidating. At least that had been her reasoning. Now, sitting at their corner table while rain streaked the windows, she wondered if she had overthought everything. Marcus arrived exactly on time, wearing dark slacks and a navy blazer that brought out his eyes. He looked comfortable in the elegant setting, but not like he was trying to prove anything. "You look beautiful," he said simply as he sat down. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." The waiter brought menus and water, and they settled into the rhythm of choosing food and wine. But underneath the normal dinner conversation, Ellie could feel something else building. A tension that was part anticipation, part nervousness, part something she couldn't quite name. "Tell me about your mother," Marcus said after they had ordered. "Why do I feel like you're asking the hard questions on purpose?" "Because I am. We can talk about the weather if you prefer, but I'd rather know what shaped you into who you are." Ellie twirled pasta around her fork, buying time. "My mother is formidable. She built a successful real estate business from nothing, raised me to be independent and strong. She taught me that emotional weakness was something I couldn't afford. That sounds like it came at a cost." "Everything comes at a cost." The response was automatic, something she had said 100 times before. But as soon as the words left her mouth, she heard how hollow they sounded. "Does it, though?" "What do you mean?" Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Love doesn't come at a cost. Kindness doesn't. Friendship doesn't. Trust doesn't. Those things might require risk, but that's different than cost." "You sound like you speak from experience. My uncle taught me that. When I came to live with him, I was angry at the world, suspicious of everyone, convinced that caring about people just meant more ways to get hurt." Marcus smiled. "Cal never tried to argue me out of it. He just kept being kind, kept being patient, kept showing up no matter how difficult I was." And that changed your mind? Eventually. It took a long time for me to understand that he wasn't being kind because he expected something back. He was doing it because that's who he was. Ellie set down her fork, her appetite fading. I don't know if I know how to be that way. What way? Kind without expecting something back. Patient without a purpose. I've spent so long thinking about everything in terms of strategy and outcomes that I'm not sure I remember how to just be with someone. The admission surprised her with its honesty. She had never said anything like that out loud before. Maybe that's why we're here, Marcus said gently. What do you mean? Maybe this is how you learn. One conversation at a time, one evening at a time. No strategy, no outcome to manage, just two people figuring out if they enjoy each other's company. And if we do? Enjoy each other's company, I mean? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. Then we figure out what comes next. Together. The simple promise in his voice made something shift inside Ellie's chest. This man, this kind, honest, patient man was offering her something she hadn't even known she wanted. The chance to be herself without calculation, to connect with someone without agenda, to explore feelings without having to control the outcome. It was the most terrifying thing she could imagine, and the most appealing. Marcus, she said softly. Yes? I'm scared. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of the way you make me want things I've never let myself want before. He reached across the table and took her hand, his touch warm and steady. What kind of things? Someone to come home to. Someone who cares how my day went. Someone who sees me as more than just my achievements. She looked down at their joined hands. Someone who might love me for who I am, instead of what I can do for them. Ellie. She looked up, meeting his eyes. You deserve all of those things. And more. The certainty in his voice, the gentle strength of his conviction, broke something open inside her. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Eleanor Walsh believed that maybe, just maybe, she was worth loving exactly as she was. They sat in the quiet restaurant, hands linked across the table, while rain continued to fall against the windows. Around them, other couples talked and laughed, but Ellie felt like she and Marcus existed in their own private space, separate from the rest of the world. What happens now? She asked finally. Marcus smiled, squeezing her hand gently. Now we take our time. We get to know each other. We see what grows between us. No pressure. No pressure. No expectations. Just possibility. Ellie felt herself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in weeks. I think I like possibility. Good, Marcus said. Because I have a feeling we're going to create some beautiful possibilities together. As they left the restaurant and walked into the gentle rain, Ellie realized that for the first time in her adult life, she had no idea what came next. No plan, no strategy, no carefully calculated next move. And instead of terrifying her, the uncertainty felt like freedom. 3 weeks later, Ellie found herself doing something she had never done before. Leaving work early on a Wednesday to meet someone who wasn't a client, investor, or business partner. Marcus had texted her during his lunch break, asking if she wanted to take a walk through Riverside Park after his route finished. She had said yes without thinking twice. The autumn air was crisp as she waited by the park entrance, watching families with children, joggers, and dog walkers move along the winding paths. When Marcus appeared, still wearing his brown delivery uniform, she felt that same warm flutter in her chest that had become familiar over the past few weeks. "How was your day?" he asked, falling into step beside her. "Busy, good busy, though. We're looking at 3 new acquisition targets." She glanced at him sideways. "How was yours?" "Mrs. Henderson on 5th Street made me cookies again. I think she's adopted me." Ellie laughed. "Does that happen often?" "More than you'd think."
People get to know their regular delivery guy. I've been invited to graduations, birthday parties, even a wedding once. That's sweet. It is. Makes the job feel more connected, I guess. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the late afternoon sun filtering through the changing leaves. Ellie found herself relaxing in a way that only seemed to happen when she was with Marcus. The constant buzz of thoughts about deals and strategies and next moves faded into the background. "Can I tell you something?" Marcus said as they paused beside the small pond where ducks floated lazily. "Of course. I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about being scared of wanting things you've never let yourself want before." Ellie turned to face him. "And?" "I understand that feeling. After what happened at my old job, I told myself I was better off wanting less, expecting less. It was safer that way." "What changed?" Marcus smiled, reaching out to brush a fallen leaf from her hair. The gesture was so natural, so tender, that it took her breath away. "You changed. Meeting you made me remember that some things are worth the risk." Before she could respond, her phone rang loudly, breaking the quiet moment. The caller ID showed her mother's name, and Ellie felt her stomach tighten with familiar anxiety. "I should probably take this," she said apologetically. "Eleanor?" Her mother's voice carried its usual brisk authority. "I've been trying to reach you all day. I've been in meetings, Mother. What's going on? The Hartwell benefit is tomorrow night. You haven't forgotten?" Ellie's heart sank. "Please." She had completely forgotten about the charity gala, one of the most important social events of the season, where half the city's business elite would gather to see and be seen. "Of course not. I'll be there." "Good. I've arranged for you to sit at the Morrison table." Despite that unfortunate business with their acquisition falling through, Richard Morrison is still an excellent connection to maintain. Ellie glanced at Marcus, who was pretending not to listen while watching the ducks. "Actually, Mother, I was thinking of bringing someone." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Ellie wondered if the call had dropped. "Bringing someone?" Linda Walsh's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "A date. Someone I've been seeing." "Who?" The single word carried enough judgment to make Ellie's defensive walls slam into place. "His name is Marcus Reed." "Reed. I don't know that family. What does he do?" Ellie looked at Marcus, who was now watching her with concerned eyes. She could lie, could invent a more acceptable profession, could avoid the confrontation she knew was coming. Instead, she took a deep breath and chose the truth. "He's a delivery driver." The silence this time was so complete that Ellie could hear her own heartbeat. "Eleanor," her mother said finally, "I think we need to have a conversation. In person. Tonight." "Mother." 7 o'clock. My house. The line went dead. Ellie stared at her phone, feeling like a teenager who had just been summoned to the principal's office. "That sounded pleasant," Marcus said gently. "I'm sorry. She has very specific ideas about things." "About people like me, you mean?" Ellie wanted to deny it, to soften the harsh reality. But Marcus deserved better than comfortable lies. "Yes," she said quietly. "About people like you." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful rather than hurt. "What are you going to tell her?" "I don't know. Do you want me to go with you?" The offer was so generous, so brave that it made her eyes sting. "No. This is something I need to handle myself." "Are you sure?" Ellie reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I'm sure. But Marcus, whatever she says, whatever arguments she makes, it doesn't change how I feel about you." "How do you feel about me?" The question was simple, but the answer felt huge, life-changing, terrifying in its implications. "I'm falling in love with you," she said, the words coming out in a rush before she could stop them.
Marcus went very still. Ellie, I know it's complicated. I know it's scary. I know there are a million reasons why it's difficult. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just casual friendship or curiosity or whatever I told myself it was in the beginning. What are you saying? I'm saying that I don't care what my mother thinks, or what society people whisper, or how it looks in the business world. I care about you. I care about us. Marcus stepped closer, his hands framing her face gently. Are you sure? Because once we say this out loud, once we make this real, there's no going back to safe and comfortable. I don't want safe and comfortable. I want real. I want you. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, there beside the pond as the sun set through the autumn trees. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling. I love you too, he said simply. I have for weeks, but I was afraid to say it. Afraid of what? Afraid that loving someone like you would mean losing myself. And now? Marcus smiled, that beautiful expression that transformed his entire face. Now I think loving you might be the best way to find out who I really am. Linda Walsh's house in the upscale Grandview neighborhood was exactly as Ellie remembered from childhood. Perfectly appointed, coldly elegant, designed to impress rather than comfort. As she sat in the formal living room at 7 o'clock sharp, Ellie felt like she was 16 again, waiting to be lectured about grades or behavior or proper deportment. Her mother entered with characteristic precision, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. At 58, Linda Walsh remained formidable, sharp-eyed, expensively maintained, and utterly convinced of her own judgment about all matters social and professional. Eleanor. She settled into the chair across from the sofa, her posture straight as a ruler. I've been doing some research on your friend. His name is Marcus, Mother. And what kind of research? The kind that any responsible parent would do when her daughter starts making questionable decisions. Linda opened a manila folder with theatrical precision. Marcus Reed, 34, employed by City Express Delivery for 3 years. Lives in a rental house in Millbrook with his uncle. No college degree, no significant assets. Each fact landed like a small slap, designed to reduce Marcus to a series of disappointing statistics. Before his current employment, Linda continued, he worked as an accountant at Morrison & Associates, coincidentally, the same firm that represents Morrison Industries, the company whose acquisition you recently canceled. Ellie felt her blood chill. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, dear. I'm stating facts. Your delivery driver boyfriend had inside knowledge of the Morrison deal. He knew exactly which clause to point out, because he had access to confidential information. That's ridiculous. Marcus saved me from making a terrible mistake. Did he? Or did he manipulate you into canceling a profitable deal, for reasons we may never understand? The accusation hung in the air like poison. Ellie felt the careful trust she had built with Marcus beginning to crack under the weight of her mother's suspicion. You think he's using me? I think he's a man with nothing to lose and everything to gain from a relationship with a successful woman. I think you're being naive about his motivations. He lost his job at Morrison & Associates for reporting fraud, Mother. He was fired for doing the right thing. Linda's smile was sharp as a blade. According to whom? Him? Have you verified that story, Eleanor? Have you spoken to anyone at Morrison & Associates? Have you done any due diligence at all on this man you claim to be falling in love with? The questions hit their mark, because they were the same questions Ellie had been trying not to ask herself. She had accepted Marcus's story without investigation, trusted his version of events without verification. In business, such blind faith would have been unthinkable. I trust him, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You trust him based on 3 weeks of carefully orchestrated encounters. You trust him because he tells you what you want to hear.
makes you feel special, pays attention to you in ways that flatter your ego. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time anyone challenged your decisions the way he did? When was the last time someone made you feel like you were being seen and understood, rather than merely tolerated for your money and position? Every word was a surgical strike aimed at Ellie's deepest insecurities. Her mother had always known exactly which buttons to push, exactly how to make her doubt herself. "What do you want me to do?" Ellie asked finally. "I want you to be smart. I want you to protect yourself and your company from someone who may not be what he seems." Linda leaned forward slightly. "Have him investigated properly. Find out the real reason he was fired, the real circumstances of his current situation. If he's genuinely the man you think he is, then you'll have proof. If he's not. And if I refuse?" Linda's expression grew cold. "Then you'll be making the same mistake your father made. Trusting the wrong person, believing pretty lies, letting emotion override good judgment." The mention of her father was a low blow, and they both knew it. David Walsh had been a dreamer, a romantic, a man who believed the best of people until his business partner embezzled everything and disappeared, leaving his family broke and broken. Ellie stood abruptly, needing to escape the suffocating weight of her mother's certainty. "I need to think." "Don't think too long, dear. Men like Marcus Reed are very good at what they do, but they're not patient. If he senses you pulling away, he may accelerate whatever timeline he's working on." As Ellie drove home through the dark streets, her mother's words echoed in her mind. 3 weeks wasn't very long to know someone. She had built her professional success on careful analysis, thorough research, and healthy skepticism. Why had she abandoned those principles when it came to Marcus? Because he made her feel things she had never felt before. Because he looked at her like she was worth loving. Because for the first time in her life, she had found someone who seemed to value her for who she was, rather than what she could provide. But what if her mother was right? What if those feelings were the very weapons being used against her? By the time she reached her apartment, Ellie had made a decision she hated but couldn't avoid. She would have Marcus investigated, quietly, thoroughly, professionally. She would learn the truth about his past, his motivations, his real reasons for approaching her. If he was genuine, the investigation would prove it, and she would have the evidence to silence her mother's doubts forever. And if he wasn't, Ellie tried not to think about that possibility as she sat alone in her elegant apartment, staring at her phone and wondering how love could feel so much like betrayal. The investigation took 4 days. 4 days during which Ellie made excuses to avoid seeing Marcus, claiming work emergencies and scheduling conflicts. 4 days during which she smiled and nodded during business meetings, while her mind churned with increasingly dark possibilities. 4 days during which she barely slept, barely ate, and questioned every moment of happiness she had felt in the past month. On Friday afternoon, the private investigator she had hired called with his preliminary findings. "The basics check out," he said in his matter-of-fact voice. Marcus Reed, age 34, employed by City Express Delivery since June 2022. Prior to that, he worked as a senior accountant at Morrison & Associates from 2017 to 2022. What about the circumstances of his departure? That's where it gets interesting. According to my contact at Morrison & Associates, Reed was terminated for cause in March 2022. Official reason given was insubordination and failure to follow direct orders regarding client confidentiality. Ellie's heart sank. What does that mean exactly? It means he was told to keep quiet about something and refused to do it. Now, whether that something was fraud, as he claims, or legitimate business that he misunderstood, I can't say without more investigation. Can you find out? For the right fee, I can find out almost anything. But Ms. Walsh, I have to ask, why does this matter so much? If you're concerned about this man's financial motivations, his current employment situation speaks for itself. He's driving a delivery truck and living in a rental house. If he's running some kind of long con, he's not very good at it.
The investigator's practical assessment should have been reassuring, but it only made Ellie feel more confused. She thanked him and ended the call, then sat staring at her phone for a long time. What was she doing? What had she become? The woman who had hired a private investigator to check up on a man whose only crime was making her feel loved, was that really who she wanted to be? Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Haven't heard from you in a few days. Is everything okay?" The simple concern in his message made her eyes fill with tears. Here was a man who had worried about her absence, who cared enough to check on her well-being, who had never asked for anything except the chance to know her better. And she had responded by having him investigated like a criminal. Before she could change her mind, Ellie called him. "Hey," Marcus answered on the second ring. "I was starting to worry about you." "Can you meet me?" she asked. "Tonight? It's important." "Of course. Maya's?" "No, somewhere private. My apartment?" There was a pause. "Ellie, is everything all right? You sound upset." "I will be, after we talk." "Okay, what time?" 7? I'll be there." After she hung up, Ellie sat in her office watching the sun set over the city. In 2 hours, she would either ruin the best thing that had ever happened to her, or she would finally choose to trust her heart over her fear. Either way, there would be no going back. Marcus arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, carrying a small bouquet of yellow flowers that he had clearly picked up at a corner market. The gesture was so simple, so thoughtful, that it nearly broke Ellie's resolve before she could begin. "You look tired," he said, studying her face with those perceptive brown eyes. "I am tired. Come in, please." She led him to the living room, gestured for him to sit on the sofa while she remained standing. The distance felt necessary, like armor against what she was about to do. "Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." His expression grew cautious. "Okay. My mother has been pressuring me to investigate you, to find out more about your background, your motivations for approaching me." Marcus went very still. And I did it. I hired a private investigator to look into your past. The silence that followed was unlike any silence Ellie had ever experienced. It seemed to fill the room, pressing against her chest, making it hard to breathe. Marcus's face showed no expression at all, but something behind his eyes was dying. "I see," he said finally. "I know how it sounds. I know how it looks. But I need you to understand that I was scared and confused. And what did you find out?" His voice was quiet, controlled, but Ellie could hear the hurt underneath. "Nothing that changes how I feel about you. Everything you told me about Morrison and Associates was essentially true. You were fired for refusing to stay quiet about something you believed was wrong." Essentially true. Marcus repeated the words like they tasted bitter, but not completely true. The investigator couldn't verify the specific details about fraud. Your former employer claims you were terminated for insubordination. Marcus nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "So you still don't know whether to believe me?" "That's not... It is, though." Marcus stood, his movements careful and deliberate. "If you believed me, you wouldn't have needed an investigation. If you trusted me, you would have told your mother to go to hell and left it at that." The words hit like physical blows because they were completely accurate. "Marcus, please, let me explain." "What's to explain?" "Your mother suggested I might be using you, and you decided she might be right." His voice remained calm, but Ellie could see the pain in his eyes. "You hired someone to dig through my life because you couldn't take my word for who I am." "I was protecting myself." "From what?" "From me? From the possibility that someone might actually love you without an agenda." The question hung in the air between them, brutal in its honesty. Ellie realized she was crying, tears running down her cheeks without her permission. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I was scared, and I made a terrible mistake." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him making some internal calculation. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle but firm. "Ellie, I need you to understand something. The reason I lost my job at Morrison & Associates wasn't just because I reported suspected fraud. It was because I trusted someone who said they loved me. And she used that trust to manipulate me into looking the other way when her father's company was being investigated." Ellie felt her blood turn to ice. "What?" "Her name was Jennifer Morrison, Richard Morrison's daughter. We dated for 6 months while I was reviewing her father's books. She convinced me that the irregularities I was seeing were just accounting differences, that I was being paranoid, that love meant trusting her judgment over my own instincts. Marcus. When I finally went to my supervisors anyway, she claimed I had tried to extort money from her family in exchange for a clean audit report. It was her word against mine, and she was a Morrison." The room seemed to spin around Ellie. "That's why you understood the contract clause so well, because you had seen Morrison Industries' tricks before." "Yes, and that's why I spoke up when I saw you walking into the same trap." Marcus moved toward the door. "But I never told you any of this because I didn't want you to think I was approaching you for revenge, or because I had some agenda related to Morrison Industries. Where are you going?" Marcus paused with his hand on the doorknob. "I'm going home, Ellie. Back to my rental house in Millbrook, back to my delivery truck, back to my invisible life. Please don't leave like this." "Like what?" "With my dignity intact? With the knowledge that I told you the truth, even though you didn't trust me enough to believe it?" "I believe you now." Marcus turned to look at her one last time. "No, you don't. You believe an investigator's report that told you I wasn't lying about the big things. But you still don't trust me enough to take my word for anything. That's not fair, isn't it? When I told you I loved you, did you believe me? Or did you wonder what I was really after?" Ellie couldn't answer because they both knew the truth. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Ellie," Marcus said softly. "But I don't think it's love. I think you're looking for someone safe enough to control, successful enough to impress your mother, and predictable enough that you never have to risk being hurt. And you think that's not you?" Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I know that's not me. I'm a man who drives a delivery truck and lives with his uncle, and lost his career for doing what he thought was right. I'm inconvenient and complicated and completely wrong for someone who needs life to make sense on a spreadsheet." He opened the door. "Take care of yourself, Eleanor." The use of her full name was like a door closing. After he left, Ellie stood in her elegant apartment, surrounded by beautiful things that suddenly felt like a prison, and realized she had just destroyed the only real love she had ever known, because she had been too afraid to believe in it. 2 weeks passed in a haze of work and regret. Ellie threw herself into new acquisition targets, worked 16-hour days, and avoided every place she might accidentally run into Marcus. She told herself she was healing, moving on, getting back to the life she had built before he complicated everything. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she knew the truth. She had made the worst mistake of her life, and she had no idea how to fix it. The realization that she had to try came during a board meeting on a gray Thursday morning. Tom was presenting analysis on a potential acquisition, a small manufacturing company with solid fundamentals and room for growth. Everything looked perfect on paper. "Any red flags?" Ellie asked automatically. "None that I can see," Tom replied. "Legal has reviewed all the documents. Financials look clean. Management structure is solid." Ellie found herself staring at the contract pages, remembering another morning, another deal that had looked perfect on paper. Remembering a quiet voice pointing out dangers that everyone else had missed. "Have we had an independent review of the liability clauses?" she asked suddenly. Tom looked puzzled. Legal reviewed everything, Ms. Walsh. I want a second opinion. Someone from outside our usual circle. Is there a particular concern? Ellie thought about Marcus, about the way he had seen through Morrison Industries' deception, about the courage it had taken for him to speak up to a room full of people who had every reason to ignore him. Sometimes we miss things because we're too close to them, she said. Sometimes we need fresh eyes. After the meeting, Ellie sat alone in her office, staring out at the city where Marcus was somewhere driving his delivery route, probably trying to forget he had ever met her. She picked up her phone and scrolled to his number, which she still hadn't deleted despite everything. Her thumb hovered over the call button for a long moment, before she lost her nerve and set the phone aside. What would she say? How could she apologize for doubting not just his word, but his entire character? How could she explain that she understood now, too late, that love meant choosing to trust even when you were scared? Her intercom buzzed. Ms. Walsh, there's someone here to see you. He says his name is Calvin Reed. Ellie's heart stopped. Marcus's uncle. Here, in her office. Send him in, she said, her voice barely steady. Calvin Reed was exactly as Marcus had described him. Tall, weathered, with kind eyes and the quiet dignity of someone who had worked with his hands his whole life. He wore clean work clothes and carried himself with the confidence of a man who had nothing to prove to anyone. Ms. Walsh, he said simply. Thank you for seeing me. Please sit down. Can I offer you coffee? Water? I'm fine, thank you. Calvin settled into the chair across from her desk, his eyes taking in the elegant office without judgment. I came to talk to you about my nephew. Ellie felt her chest tighten. How is he? Hurting. But I expect you know that. Yes, I know that. Calvin studied her for a moment. Marcus didn't send me here. He'd be furious if he knew I came. But I raised that boy, and I've never seen him care about someone the way he cares about you. Mr. Reed, Calvin. And I'm not here to ask you to take him back or to make excuses for whatever went wrong between you two. Calvin leaned forward slightly. I'm here to tell you something about Marcus that he would never tell you himself. Ellie waited. When Marcus was 15 and came to live with me, he was angry and scared and convinced that everyone who claimed to care about him would eventually leave. His mama had died. His daddy was never around to begin with, and he felt like the world had taught him that love was just another word for disappointment. Calvin's voice was steady, matter of fact, but Ellie could hear the deep affection underneath. It took me 3 years to convince that boy that I wasn't going anywhere. 3 years of showing up every day, of being patient when he tested me, of proving that some people mean what they say. Calvin paused. But once he learned to trust, once he opened his heart, he became the most loyal person I've ever known. Why are you telling me this? Because whatever happened between you two, it wasn't about him trying to use you or deceive you. That's not who Marcus is. If he said he loved you, he meant it. If he told you something about his past, it was the truth as he knew it. Ellie felt tears stinging her eyes. I know that. I know that now. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you let fear make your decisions for you. The gentle accusation hit its mark. I was trying to protect myself. From what? From being loved by a good man? From being used? From being manipulated? From repeating my family's history of trusting the wrong people? Calvin nodded slowly. I understand that fear. But let me ask you something. In the time you knew Marcus, did he ever ask you for money? Did he ever try to get you to invest in something, or loan him something, or use your business connections for his benefit? Ellie thought back through every conversation, every evening together, every moment of connection they had shared. No, never. Did he ever pressure you to introduce him to important people, or take him to fancy events, or change your lifestyle to include him in it? No. Then what exactly was he getting from this relationship that made you think he might be using you? The question hung in the air while Ellie searched for an answer that made sense. What had Marcus gotten from knowing her? Company. Conversation. Someone who listened to him, who valued his opinion, who enjoyed his presence. The same things she had gotten from him. He wasn't getting anything, she whispered. No, he was just loving you, and you punished him for it because love felt too dangerous to trust. Calvin stood, preparing to leave. I'm not here to convince you to do anything, Ms. Walsh. You're a grown woman who can make her own choices. But I wanted you to know the kind of man you walked away from. After he left, Ellie sat alone in her office as the afternoon light faded into evening. She thought about Marcus. Not the man she had investigated, but the man she had known. The man who had saved her from a disastrous business deal without expecting anything in return. The man who had listened to her fears and insecurities without judgment. The man who had seen through her carefully constructed defenses to the lonely woman underneath and had chosen to love her anyway. The man she had destroyed with her inability to believe that such love could be real. For the first time in 2 weeks, Ellie knew exactly what she had to do. It might be too late. It might be impossible. But she had to try. She had to find Marcus and tell him the truth. That she loved him, that she trusted him, and that she was ready to choose love over fear. Even if he couldn't forgive her. Even if she had already lost him forever. The next morning, Ellie Walsh did something she had never done in her professional life. She cleared her entire schedule, delegated all her meetings to Tom, and set out to find the man she loved. It was time to stop protecting herself and start fighting for what mattered. Marcus's delivery route took him through 12 neighborhoods across the city, from the gleaming downtown business district to the quiet residential streets where children played in small front yards. Ellie had gotten his schedule from the dispatcher at City Express, a cheerful woman who seemed delighted to help reunite two lovers, not knowing the full story of how badly Ellie had broken things between them. She found him at 2:30 in the afternoon, making a delivery to a small bookstore in the arts district. Through the window, she watched him chat easily with the elderly store owner, his smile genuine and warm. He looked tired, she thought, but still himself, still the man who had captured her heart with his quiet strength and gentle honesty. When he emerged from the store and saw her waiting by his delivery truck, Marcus stopped short. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he approached slowly, his expression carefully neutral. Ellie. Her name sounded strange in his voice, formal and distant. Hi. She felt suddenly nervous, unsure how to begin. I was hoping we could talk. I'm working. I know, but please, just 5 minutes. Marcus glanced around the busy street, then gestured toward a small park across from the bookstore. 5 minutes. They walked to a bench under a large oak tree, its leaves just beginning to turn gold with the approaching autumn. Ellie noticed that Marcus sat carefully apart from her, maintaining distance that felt like a chasm. I met your uncle yesterday, she began. Marcus's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger or embarrassment. He had no right to interfere. He loves you. He was trying to protect you. From what? From me, I think. From the damage I caused by not trusting you. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hands clasped in his lap. Calvin means well, but this isn't his problem to solve. Marcus, I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for hiring the investigator, but for all of it. For doubting you, for listening to my mother's suspicions, for being too scared to believe that someone like you could love someone like me without an agenda. Someone like me. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Marcus turned to face her. Ellie,
The problem isn't that you hired an investigator. The problem is why you hired him. You couldn't believe that a delivery driver might genuinely care about a CEO. You couldn't trust that someone from my background might see you as more than a business opportunity. The accusation stung because it was partially true, but not in the way he thought. "You're right," she said quietly, "but not for the reasons you think." "What do you mean?" Ellie took a deep breath, gathering courage for the hardest truth she had ever had to speak. "I couldn't believe you loved me because I've never believed I was worth loving. Not for who I am anyway. My whole life people have valued me for what I could do for them, what I could provide, how I could advance their interests. The idea that someone might love me just because I'm me. I didn't know how to trust that." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "Ellie, I hired the investigator because I was terrified that if I let myself believe you loved me, really loved me, and then found out I was wrong, it would destroy me. So I tried to prove you were lying before I could fall any deeper." She looked down at her hands, "But I was already deeper than I realized. I was already in love with you, and the investigation couldn't change that." They sat in silence while children played nearby and traffic moved along the busy street. Finally, Marcus spoke. "What do you want from me, Ellie?" "I want a chance to prove that I trust you. I want to show you that I can choose love over fear. I want—" She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "I want us to try again." Marcus was quiet for so long that Ellie began to think he wouldn't respond at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "Do you know why I didn't fight harder to keep my job at Morrison & Associates?" The question seemed to come from nowhere. Because they had already made up their minds? "No, because I realized that working for people who didn't trust my integrity wasn't worth the salary they were paying me." Marcus looked directly at her. "I won't do that in my personal life either, Ellie. I won't be with someone who needs proof that I'm not trying to hurt them. I don't need proof anymore. Don't you? If your mother calls tomorrow with new suspicions about me, will you investigate those too? If someone at a party whispers that I'm only with you for your money, will you start wondering if they're right?" The questions were painful, because Ellie couldn't honestly answer them. How could she promise that her fears wouldn't resurface? How could she guarantee that her ingrained need to protect herself wouldn't override her desire to trust him? "I don't know," she admitted. "I want to say yes. I want to promise that I'll never doubt you again. But I can't be sure that fear won't win sometimes." Marcus nodded, as if her honesty confirmed something he already knew. "Then we don't have anything to build on. What if—" Ellie's voice was barely a whisper. "What if we build it anyway? What if we try, even knowing it might be hard, even knowing I might stumble sometimes?" "Why would you want to try? You said it yourself. This is complicated. People will talk. Your mother will disapprove. Your business associates will judge you. Why put yourself through that for someone who might not be worth the trouble?" Ellie looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the man who had risked his job to point out a dangerous contract clause, the man who had shared his painful history without expecting anything in return, the man who had loved her gently and patiently while she learned to trust her own feelings. "Because you are worth the trouble," she said firmly. "Because what we had together was real and beautiful and the best thing that's ever happened to me. Because I love you, Marcus Reed, and I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions for me." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Hope, maybe, or the memory of what they had shared. "What are you saying, Ellie?" "I'm saying I want to fight for us. I want to choose love over safety. I want to build something real with you, even if it's messy and complicated and scares the hell out of me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Ellie held her breath while he considered her words. "If we do this," he said finally, "if we try again,
It has to be different. No more investigations. No more letting other people's opinions drive your decisions. If you have concerns about me, you come to me directly. Yes. And no more apologizing for who I am or what I do. I'm proud of my work, proud of my life. I won't be your secret or your project. I would never want you to be. And if this gets serious, if we build something real together, you have to be prepared for the consequences. Your mother might never accept me. Your friends might whisper. Some doors might close for you. Ellie thought about her elegant apartment, her successful business, her carefully constructed social life. Then she thought about quiet evenings with Marcus, about feeling truly seen and understood, about the possibility of building a love that was honest and deep and lasting. Then we'll build new doors, she said. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him since she had confessed to the investigation. It transformed his face, brought light back to his eyes, made her remember why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. Are you sure, Ellie? Really sure? She stood up and extended her hand to him. I'm sure. The question is whether you're willing to take another chance on someone who's still learning how to trust her heart. Marcus looked at her outstretched hand, then up at her face. Whatever he saw there must have convinced him, because he smiled and took her hand, letting her pull him to his feet. I love you, Eleanor Walsh, he said simply. I love you too, Marcus Reed. This time, when he kissed her under the golden autumn leaves, Ellie felt no fear, no doubt, no calculation of risks and benefits. She felt only love and possibility, and the quiet joy of choosing to trust in something bigger than her need to stay safe. They had work to do, she knew. Trust to rebuild, fears to face, a future to create together. But for the first time in her life, Eleanor Walsh was ready to let love lead the way, and that felt like the beginning of everything. 3 months later, as snow dusted the city streets and holiday lights sparkled in windows, Ellie and Marcus walked hand in hand through the same park where they had found each other again. They had spent the evening at Calvin's house, sharing dinner and stories and the comfortable warmth of family acceptance. Your uncle likes me, Ellie said, squeezing Marcus's hand. He thinks you're good for me. Am I? Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her, his breath visible in the cold air. You make me believe in possibilities I'd forgotten about. You challenge me to see myself as more than my mistakes. You love me for exactly who I am. He smiled. Yes, Ellie, you're very good for me. Even when I get scared and need reassurance. Especially then. It means you're letting me see your fears instead of hiding them. They resumed walking, their footsteps crunching softly in the new snow. Around them, the city sparkled with holiday magic. But Ellie was focused on the man beside her. Solid, steady, real. Marcus? I've been thinking about something Calvin said the day he came to see me. What's that? He said that once you learn to trust, you become the most loyal person he's ever known. She looked up at him. I want to be that for you. Loyal. Trustworthy. Someone you can count on no matter what. Marcus stopped walking again, pulling her into his arms right there on the snowy sidewalk. Ellie, you already are. Really, really, do you know how I know? How? Because you came after me. When you realized what you'd lost, you didn't protect your pride or wait for me to make the first move. You fought for us. Ellie felt tears stinging her eyes, but they were happy tears. Grateful tears. I almost lost you because I was too scared to believe in what we had. But you didn't lose me. We found each other again, and we're stronger because of it. He was right, she realized. The investigation, the hurt, the fear, all of it had forced them to build their relationship on a deeper foundation. They had faced their worst fears about each other and chosen to love anyway. What happens now? She asked. Marcus smiled, that beautiful expression that never failed to make her heart flutter. Now we keep building, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of trust at a time. Together. Together. As they walked home through the falling snow, Ellie marveled at how different her life had become. She still ran her company, still made important decisions, still lived in her elegant apartment downtown. But now she also had quiet Sunday mornings with Marcus, dinners with Calvin, the deep satisfaction of being known and loved completely. She had learned that love wasn't about finding someone safe or convenient or socially appropriate. Love was about finding someone who saw you clearly and chose you anyway, someone who challenged you to be better while accepting you exactly as you were, someone worth fighting for, even when, especially when, the fight was with your own fears. Marcus Reed had taught her that. A delivery driver with gentle hands and a generous heart had shown her what it meant to trust, to choose vulnerability over protection, to build something real and lasting and true. And every day, in 1,000 small ways, she was learning to love him back with the same courage he had shown in loving her first. It was the most beautiful education of her life. Chewy and 3.